But thanks to our friends for supporting this event and all our events, our programs here. And thanks to y'all for showing up on a beautiful autumn day and being inside with us for a little while as we learn about the outsides, the outdoors here, our wonderful outdoors in South Carolina with John Lane. And we do have an event tomorrow as well, Movable Feast with John Lane and the great Phil Wilkinson.
The legendary.
The Gator Man. We've seen him here before, who has not friends, but acquaintances, longtime acquaintances, who are alligators, of course, spent 6 decades getting to know the gators of Georgetown County. They co-produced this book, 7 Days on the Santee Delta, right here in Georgetown County. It's a gorgeous book, just beautiful inside and out, as you can see with that cover there. Phil took the photographs from his many years working for South Carolina DNR and studying gators, researching alligators here. They were endangered species, if you can believe that, back when he started, and now they're really thriving around here. And Phil and John spent 7 days on the Santee Delta.
A lot more than that, but
recorded in the book, looking around and photographing, writing about it. There's some poems in there with Phil, and they're going to talk about that book tomorrow at, is it 1 o'clock?
No, it's
11 o'clock. Yeah, 11 to 1.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tomorrow for Movable Feast.
And I'll have this over there on the counter if y'all want to look through it. Just look through it at Phil's photos. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
He's got thousands. He's one of the best photographers in the Southeast, and he had thousands of photos of this area, and he sent them 300, he says, and they chose 115. So, but it's just an incredible set of photos of this area.
Yeah.
And the writing's pretty good too, I think.
Writing's not bad either.
Not bad, both of us.
Yeah. And want to say thank you to Tom Santropetro, who brought us in with beautiful music again. He was off in September, but Tom is back again, going strong. So he'll be here for First Thursday. So show up early, usually here an hour early, and you get free piano music. Tom refuses to charge us, so he just donates his time and talent. So let's give Tom a round of applause.
Bravo.
Really appreciate all that he does for us. And Mondays you can catch him at noon as well for piano picnics here. So John Lane, I think I'll do a kind of a visual introduction. He's got almost 20 books now. I think by probably in a couple of weeks he'll have more than 20. He's got a couple more coming out. It's a book on animals coming out soon, and another novel in the docket. But these are the ones that he brought along to be available for sale today. Neighborhood Hawks, he talked about this last time he was here down visiting. A Year Following Wild Birds. This is a great one from University of Georgia Press. In his backyard, a couple of hawks.
Yeah.
Observed them.
Yeah, I read this book called The Peregrine by J.A. Baker, an English writer from the 60s, and the whole premise of the book is that he's following these peregrine falcons for a year. He actually followed them for 10 years, but he condensed that into a sort of Henry Thoreauvian mythical year, and so he's following these birds, and his whole premise is these birds aren't going to be around for another 10 years because they're going to go extinct because the shells are thin and pesticides in England and all this stuff. This is in the 60s. And it's a very elegiac book of loss. And I started looking around my neighborhood and said, whoa, these red-shouldered hawks are everywhere, and they've done really well. And the peregrines, by the way, didn't go away either. They've come back. But I started looking at these red-shouldered hawks, and I started thinking, I can follow these birds for a real year, and I can only write about what actually happens in that 1 year and not condense it and not follow them for, not quite be so literary. And so I followed these birds for a year, and I made a vow that every time I heard the birds, if you know anything about red-shouldered hawks, every time I've been down here at this place, there's been one outside. If you know anything about red-shouldered hawks, they're very noisy. They're the noisiest bird, noisiest hawk, I think. They just cry all the time. And they also are always near water, fresh water, unlike red-tailed hawks, which will be on the ridge tops, and their cries aren't as exciting. They actually, the red-tailed hawk's cries are exciting. They actually substitute the cry of the red-tailed hawk for that of the bald eagle in movies. When they want to show an eagle crying, they'll dub in a red-tailed hawk's cry. But anyway, so I made a vow that I would go out and follow these hawks from my house every time I heard them for an entire year. If I heard the hawks at 6 a.m., I got up and I walked outside and I found where they were. And I would just sit there and listen or watch and then record a bunch of other stuff that happened too during that time and got sort of sidetracked. So it ended up being, I've always wanted to write an almanac, a daily follow something for a year and then edit it down and make a book out of it. And I was pleased with the way this one came out.
It's, a wonderful book. One of my favorites, which is saying something of John's books. And it's, just taking a topic, what seems like a narrow topic, and it just becomes, it just opens up a huge amount of subject matter about the ecology, about birds and
about
animals,
me.
About the individual.
My wife said to me during the making of this book, we were sitting on the back porch, and I was listening, of course, Maybe there's something about being distracted too. I like getting away, and walking away. And I have class at 10 o'clock. Oh, well, maybe I'll be a little late because I got to go follow these birds. But my wife said to me during that time, what is it that draws your heart to wild things? That question becomes one of the central questions through the book. Why is it? Because as you know, there's probably a variety of responses to wild creatures in this room even. Just that you're here to listen to somebody talk about rivers, you probably love the wild, but not everybody loves wild things. Not everybody's heart is drawn to wild things. And my wife, and Dan, do you think I ever answered her in the book? I mean, do I ever get to that? To the end of that answer?
I think it is more of a question. It's a quest, really.
Yeah.
That throughout, and I think that underlies all your books.
Yeah.
There is something that drives you into wildness.
Yeah.
But there's a mystery there in all these books. And he's got great novels, and another one coming out. Time and Tide on Edisto Island with Billy Baldwin and our friend Drew Lanham, who was here. He's a poet, excellent poet, wonderful poet too, Anthropocene Blues. So any of these are great. But there's that drive to find place out in the
and not
wilderness.
just place, because place could be city, urban.
Right.
I mean, but I do like urban wildness too. But even in a city, I'm always looking for not the ways that human beings have settled the landscape and made this not a topic, but I'm always looking for those little places. Like I said, even coming down here, I hear the red-shouldered hawks every time I'm at this library. So that means they're nesting somewhere because their territories are only about a mile. They don't vary outside that mile very much. So there's a pair of red-shouldered hawks, and they also don't migrate. So that was one thing that was interesting to me, is that they're here all year, and they're even in Spartanburg all year. They found a way to make a living as a bird in a place 365 days a year. And they found a way to make a living with people nearby, because they're known to nest. They'll nest in the same tree every year. And in the book, I have a funny scene where one of my neighbors is really pissed off because these red-shouldered hawks are nesting above his car and doing what birds do, nesting birds do. And he says to me one day, "I'm going to kill those birds." And I told him, "You kill those birds and I'll report you. It's a $10,000 fine." And we got into a little thing about that. But there's a good example of, what's more important, fecal matter on a car or a pair of nesting red-shouldered hawks? A lot of people would say the fecal matter on the car is more important. If those birds are going to let it go on my car, they don't deserve to be here, or they shouldn't be here. Not deserve to, but shouldn't be here. And I have an obviously a different opinion. Move your car.
And there's that. So there's a love for wild things that's heightened in you, and there's also there's an attention, like you listen, a heightened attention to that. And that was one of your recommendations last time, was attend, or attention.
Attend.
Pay attention out there.
My 20 books are about that. Attend to your world. And I, like in the coyote book, you didn't mention this, but I wrote an entire book about southern coyotes. And I have three. Dan's an old academic, and I am too, but taught English for 32 years. But I have three sort of thesis statements in the book. Number one, they're here. There's nobody in this room that probably could deny that. They're here. They're here. Number two, they're not going away. No matter what we do, no matter how many we kill, they're not going away. And number three, if number one and number two are true, they're here and they're not going away, the biggest question as a human being, a Homo sapien, is how do we have a relationship with them, and what is that relationship? If our relationship is I'm going to kill everyone that I see, fine. I mean, I can't do anything about that, but they're here and they're not going away. So that killing becomes a different thing if you know those first two things and you still do the third one. It's different. And so attending to not only the landscape but to the dynamics of the landscape is another thing that I always do this, and not everybody does it, but I always privilege the more than human world over the human world.
More than human world.
Yeah, that's not my phrase. That's David Abrams, a philosopher, calls it. I mean, I had a Baptist minister corner me once and go at me about this phrase. What do you mean by the more than human world? The most important thing on the planet is human beings, and there is no more than human world. The human world is the most important world, and David Abrams, this philosopher, argues that there's the human world and there's the more than human world, and that I tend to privilege the more than human world over the human world. Although I'm a human, and I know that I need certain things, gasoline and cars and clothing, and so I don't completely privilege it. I don't run around naked and eat hickory nuts as my primate ancestors.
That's another book.
I could make another book out of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just philosophically privilege that. And I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy the preacher who corners me and says, "I don't agree with you."
Yeah.
We usually have a great conversation out of that.
But the idea is that there's something beyond human,
more than human,
that we
the
need
whole
to,
world. I mean, y'all got that statement, right? It's not that an ant is more important than a human, or a coyote is more important than a human, but the whole thing, the whole planet, and all its living impulses is more important than we are. And if we lived that way, we would wear different clothing and drive different vehicles. And we're beginning to work that way, and people are beginning to get this. But we either get it or or we ain't going to be a part of the more than, it'll just be the world with
There's
no
some
humans in it.
self-interest too,
Because the cockroaches are the bacteria are not going away. Even with climate change, the bacteria aren't going away, and probably the coyotes aren't going away with climate change either.
All right. So that self-sustainability is involved too with humans, is being part of the larger picture.
And that's a huge piece of literature now too, is people sort of throwing stories out there, dystopian stories about what it's like if we go away. That's
absolutely
a big part of it.
So envisioning the human from more than human perspectives, and that's something that we get in this book, which is
my favorite title of 20 titles.
20 titles now, Still Upright and Headed Downstream, colon, and let's hope we all are, Collected River Writing. So, and a great cover illustration there. I love that. One of my favorites of yours. But it's, so this is, and this collected river writing, although, I was fascinated by, at the back, he kind of gives John gives an account of what he put in, essays and chapters that are
40 years worth of writing.
And what was out. And there's so much that you left out too, so this is a sampling. It's not all his river writing, just a sampling of it, and it's still, it's a full account. Still upright and headed downstream. This is one of those, maybe one of the most intensive, maybe the most intensive sites, the river or waterways of your connection with the wild, with wildness, this source of, the deep attraction, but also mystery. There's something that you can't ever probe fully. You can't understand fully there. Why, I guess generally, why rivers? Why are rivers so compelling?
Well, I came to rivers the way most people who fall in love with rivers came to rivers. I found it as a young person super exciting to get in a canoe or in a kayak and go down a river. More exciting, and I know there are people who this is true with. I found it, I tried motorboats and I tried self-propelled boats. And my particular personality, jet skis and motorboats did not engage it the way that canoes and kayaks did. And there were a number of reasons. One reason was I enjoyed the craft of paddling. Now I know Phil spent many years with motorboats, and he'll tell me, John, but there's a craft to a motorboat too. You got to know how to, you got to know some motor maintenance. You got to know all kinds of things. But there is a real craft to paddling. You got a boat and you got a paddle, or an oar if you're paddling this way. But you've got to know the most efficient way to make that boat go forward. And that's not a really easy thing. Right. Most people find out, particularly if you paddle canoes, two people paddle in a canoe, right away you find out how much craft there is involved to making it go straight. And so as a young person, it wasn't the landscape and the environment that engaged me, it was the craft, and also the idea that there were also certain sorts of rivers, and that some rivers fall through rocks with whitewater, and you really got to have some craft to do that. And that's what engaged me. That's where I entered rivers, was through the adrenaline of whitewater paddling. I say in here somewhere that one of my mentors was a poet named Donald Hall, and he had a theory once about sports writing. And his theory was, the smaller the ball, the better the writing. And if you think about that, golf, baseball, basketball, football, beach balls, I don't know. But he argued that the best writing out there in sports writing was about golf and baseball. And that as you move toward basketball and football, it's harder to write about those than in a beautiful sort of literary way, not just in a reporting way, but a literary way. It's harder to write about those sports. And one reason is because they're more violent and they're more adrenaline driven and they're faster. It's just harder to get there. And so I started thinking, is there a similar theory about outdoor sports? And the theory I came up with was the less adrenaline, the better the riding. If you think about it, the best writing about the outdoors is about rock climbing and hiking, I think. There's a lot of good writing about people walking and people climbing up mountains and rocks. And one reason is because it's so slow and it's so cerebral, and you can think about it, and and all this stuff. And then you get to kayaking and stuff like that, and it's harder to write about the adrenaline sports. And so I set out from the very beginning, when I became an adrenaline sports junkie, to say, well, maybe I can bring some literary flair to writing about whitewater. And I think I have. I mean, I not only have tried it in this book, but My Paddle to the Sea and Chattooga, Descending into the Myth of Deliverance River, are my two other river books. And both of them, I try to write about whitewater and paddling whitewater in a literary manner.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, there's, you also, you bring in, you know, the science of rivers, you bring in that kind of scientific sort of background, intellectual background about the rivers and the landscapes, the wildlife, the naturalist sort of view, but you give it a lyrical flair and a philosophical flair as you work your way down the river. It's not just about, you give us some adventure, you know, you almost, one time you nearly
die a few times,
yeah.
It's important in adrenaline literature, you've got to almost nearly die.
And you write about other people's deaths on rivers and near deaths on rivers. There's plenty of adrenaline for going on in these pages. So there's danger and death, but there's reflection and that cerebral part and the lyrical part too that's going on.
Let me read deeper. 3 pages to you from the beginning of the book. The very first essay was the very first piece of prose that I published about rivers in 1984 in the state paper. If anybody can remember back that long ago, the state paper in Columbia had a Sunday supplement magazine full of really good writing. And I got to write for them. That's where I learned to be a prose writer, was writing for this magazine. And the editor said to me, a woman named Claudia Brinson, wonderful editor, still on the board of the South Carolina Academy of Authors.
Right,
But Claudia said to me, you paddle kayaks, why do you love falling water? Why do you love falling water? And write me a 700-word or 800-word piece about that, and we'll publish it with a couple of pictures of you going down whitewater rapids and stuff like that. So I got to cover a story called Why I Love Falling Water out of it, and here it is. It's 2.5 pages long. So small print, but just so you know, the end is out there. He's not going to read forever. Okay. Now you got to remember, this is a self 40 years ago writing this. So most weekends, you can find me in the mountains west of Asheville or in the foothills of Walhalla, South Carolina. I search out the places where rivers, mostly with Native American names, fall through the hard rock of the Blue Ridge. That's where the glint and sparkle of whitewater breaks soft greens and mud reds of flowing streams. These are not the cold, dark rivers, slow and thick as pitch, of the low country. They are not even the clay flows of Piedmont counties, gathering the eroded country fields from smaller streams. My rivers hang like lace in the early fog among laurels and junipers. When I get to the river, I take down the blue kayak from the car racks, shuck my flatland clothes, and outfit myself like a Greek warrior. If it's cool, I pull on my wetsuit, feeling slick as an eel, then layer myself with a red paddling jacket and blue life vest. I pull on my black shoes called reef walkers, find my nose clip, snap on my helmet, then I pull on my spray skirt, a rubber gasket to keep the river out, and carry the boat and my paddle down to the edge of the river. I slip into the bobbing boat, legs first, like sitting in a green bean, so thin and tippy. The boat pauses in the current, and I sit deep for steadiness. I nose into the moving water. But like most manners of love, there's the shift of tone, and also trying to deepen the essay. You know, I've been writing about cat, and it's like most manners of love. Love? What's love have to do with kayaking? Kayaking is not easy. To paddle with skill takes an attention as deliberate and practiced as any true human affection. I call my shoulder, the one that hurts when it rains, Painted Rock. It was there years ago on the Chattooga where I made the wrong stroke and ended up kissing smooth stones on the bottom of the falling river. My wrist is Delabar's Rock on the Nantahala. As a novice, I eddied in a shallow pool above the rapid, drifted back and flipped. The rapid, which now seems tame, that time rolled me into the cold water. I paddled for shore, my wrist bent back by the current. It throbbed for days. My knee, the right one, has a name too. It's called Little Corky on the green. That's where I jammed it up into the deck of my boat, trying to roll my green bean upright after flipping in a curling wave. Next day, I stuffed knee pads with foam rubber, hobbled, waited for the next weekend to take my pain away. I came up with a name for the sport I invented, full contact kayaking. Early in my kayaking, every river was a roller derby when I headed downstream. It took a summer to get out of bumping into river things, rocks, trees, other boats. I was a worshiper of collisions. But one weekend on the Nantahala, it all changed. The current was a jade swirl as always, but I finally had done enough groundwork. I leaned out instead of fearing for my balance, caught the river headed for the sea, and floated with it. The stroke, so foreign to me at one time, seemed part of my arm, my back, and my waist. The paddle was my extended hand, the boat my body. I was learning to love rivers. I gave up my life for 2 or 3 days each weekend to feel the water bend around me, the rocks break and scatter a smooth stream in front of me. I'd learned to make the right movement of my being. The right movement took me where I wanted to go. That's why I fell in love. Rivers made me realize I'm in the world, moving through at the length of my own seated body times 2. Each moment is an edge with 2 clear sides. I make the wrong choices, and I'm on the rocks, or caught in a place I should not be. In the life I live Monday through Friday, I'm encouraged to do 3 things at once, not one. One thing at a time is all I can afford to do on the river. One motion done well, followed by another perfect motion. That's how to get downstream. That's how to stay upright in all that churning. Paddling is like learning to live with friends or lovers. With the wrong choices, there's sometimes pain. But to live within the responsibility of this choosing is to make it a part of a balanced world. Like the water snake on the river's bank, like the rapid in equilibrium with the river's flow around the next bend, like death and our own lives moving toward us one day at a time. But this paddling of wild rivers looks like a loss of common sense to those who do not know rivers. Much as divorce looks to those on the outside, caught in the backwash. Why would I want to throw my own body into a plastic boat and invite the river to twist me around a steady rock? Hiking is much safer. Biking, shark wrestling, why not take up one of these? There are other ways most good to get close to the earth, to be alone with it, but rivers are mine. My little friend Haley, 3-year-old poet with an ear for people's situations, once listened to me tell my painted rock story. She twisted her hands and looked up. John, this time, find a soft river, she pleaded. The rivers are getting softer every weekend. I'm learning to love them, and they seem to be falling for me. Ooh, bad pun. I sit by their grinding waters and listen for what they have to say. When I paddle down them, I look deep within the still pools behind the rocks, in the rapids, those places where the river kisses resistant rock and then backs away. I hear the roar of wildness and make out pure vowels of something other than me, and I've moved to do the right thing. Wow, there's a lot of my philosophy in that piece. I've kind of played out that stuff through 20 years, for 40 years.
1984,
Yeah.
and it really, that's what you start this collection with.
One of my first pieces of prose I
And
ever published.
that's amazing, and I hadn't, it's amazing how it sets the scene for this collection, but also it really does for your river writing and so much of your writing to come. I mean,
Interesting.
there's a lot there.
I'm hearing things that I've never heard before. That's what happens when you read stuff you write. You don't know everything that's going on in a piece. You never do. And it takes people like Dan Turner to tell me what's going on in a piece with his work he's done. But one of the things I hear in this piece, this was 1984. I got divorced from my first wife in 1982. So I was only 2 years away from that divorce, and it was a whitewater river. We were only married 2 years, and it did not end well, obviously, with the divorce.
Lots of collisions.
And lots of
Hard
collisions, lots of pain, lots of anger, and it took me 20 years before I married again. And even though I don't say that, that's what this essay is about. They always say that personal essays, have an apparent subject, and then they have a deeper subject. And if you think about it, the apparent subject, obviously, of this essay is rivers and whitewater kayaking and all this stuff. But it's really about how do you proceed in life and not just lose it.
Give up, yeah.
Not just give up, yeah.
And it's hard, and life is hard, but it's also beautiful, and there's that persistent, the resiliency is so important.
Yeah.
And that's what comes through. And it's also, listening to it, you can get it on the page, but it is lyrical. It's beautifully written as well. You can tell that the young poet is getting going. He's getting his chops. Rivers make me realize I'm in the world, and then one thing at a time is all I can afford to do on the river, that kind of zen
And y'all
moment.
probably all been on a river and felt that there's this thing, then I talk about it in this book, there's this thing called river time. And the minute you're on a river, everything, the time changes. And you drop into that state. And that's another reason I don't like mechanized as much as I like non-mechanized, because it's harder to get to that place in a boat with a motor. It's harder. It's not impossible. You can get there. You can get to river time. But in a boat with a motor, it's like a story I heard Gary Snyder, a great poet, California poet, tell once about going to Australia the first time, and he was with a bunch of Aborigines, and he was trying to understand dream time and the way that they saw time. And he said that he was in a car with them, and they were driving along, and they were getting their stories screwed up. And he couldn't figure out what was going on, and he finally figured it out, that they were used to telling their stories at a walking pace about the landscape, and that you put them in a car and you break the whole thing up, because the time isn't the same of driving and walking. The pace, it's not just about distance, it's about the way that you're, and the same is true with rivers. There is a difference in paddling a kayak or a canoe down a river and going down in and I like motorboats. I like being in them, but I really love it when I drop into this river time.
Yeah. and you can kind of, you put us in there, you can feel that, you know, by proxy at a remove. We feel like we're kind of in the boat, we're putting on the armor almost.
It is great, like a Greek warrior,
Like a Greek
I
warrior,
say.
the helmet, the life jacket,
And
all
I
that.
returned to that image. I have a book of poems that came out about 5 years ago called the Mad Kayaker Poems.
Yeah.
And I returned to that Greek warrior image in those poems because it is kind of, I mean, even though I'm talking about it as if it's sort of some Zen state, it's also a battle to be to be in a kayak in a whitewater river because you can get hurt. Well, this title comes from I was sitting at the top of a rapid early in my kayaking career with a woman, upstate woman that I paddled with a lot, and I was a little scared of going down this rapid, and we were kind of looking down it, and I said to her, wanting some advice, I said, so how do I paddle this rapid? And I wanted directions. You go left, and then you go right, and then you go back left, and she just looked at me and she said, upright and downstream, and peeled out of the rapid and down and left me there sitting in the rapid. And so I'm thinking now 40 years later, I'm still upright and I'm still headed downstream. So I did something right.
Yeah, but you do, you know, you need that armor as you, I mean, you got painted rock as your wrist, and you know, you do get banged up. At least early on, you got especially banged up because you weren't as skillful. But you kind of carry the river with you,
Yes.
even off the river.
Yeah, especially
physically.
if you believe that thing that people say that physical pain in the body actually carries the emotional damage or whatever that put it there. You know, that it's not just you broke your wrist. I broke my wrist really badly playing football when I was eighth grade, and I mean it still aches to this day. And every time it aches, I think about that moment when I heard it, because it carries, that injury carries. I've got ribs that I broke playing basketball, and I ran into one of those metal stanchions that holds up a goal, and I think about that moment every time that those ribs start aching a little bit.
Yeah. So physically, there's that memory, you know, kind of and the memory of the river carrying with you off the river, emotionally as well. You got that in there, and it's love, but it's, you know, it's kind of love-hate. It's a tough love, and you even have the surface subject that, well, this is about rivers, and it is, but there's the depth. It's about your emotional state at the time, the divorce, and
I do mention divorce, actually. I do mention divorce. I make it kind of abstract, as if it didn't happen to me, but I do mention it. Now, one thing that you might think, oh, this is the first piece in the book, they're all going to be like this. I tend, as the 40 years progresses, Dan mentioned this, but I tend to become a little more journalistic, a little less lyrical. The lyricism, I would say, is still there at the end, but I write more about the sociology of rivers, the politics of rivers, the history of rivers, rather than just that I-centered lyrical self in relation to rivers. I write about, you know, one of the best assignments I ever got was National Geographic Books called me and said, we want you to write a long essay for a book we're doing on rivers, and we want to send you to Pennsylvania, and we want you to write about the entire length of the Youghiogheny River. We're going to pay for you to go up there, and we're going to hire you a guide for these harder stretches to the top where you really might get killed if you're not careful. But we want you to paddle every piece of it all the way to the Monongahela River, where the confluence with that. And so you'll be up there for 10 days, and you're going to write this long essay about that river. But we want it to be not just your perceptions of the river. We want you to get a lot of good history in there and all that stuff. So I had to do a lot of, you know, National Geographic expects a certain level of research, and so so I had to do that. But it was one of the great fun parts. My phone is going off.
Yeah,
it'll stop.
and And that's a pattern, I think, throughout the essays. This opening essay probably is the most, maybe the most lyrical, the most personal, the most philosophical, and it is, it's kind of everything all together. A lot of themes that show up later that carries on, but it does, you get more focused on particulars, I guess, as you go out.
Particular rivers. I mean, there are rivers in this book. I don't remember exactly how many there are, but it's
lots.
It's 30. I paddle 40 different rivers in this book.
You're in Mexico,
Peru,
South America,
all over the place. Out west,
in Pittsburgh, out west,
up north.
In your backyard.
In my backyard. Yeah, I mean, that's been a big thing for me. Is I've done a number of stories. When I moved in, when we built this house in Spartanburg, it occurred to me, I mean, I'm a kayaker, and there's a big creek in my backyard, and if I put into this creek, I could paddle the ocean. And all I would have to do is get around a few dams, and I can make it to the ocean. And so that became sort of an obsession with me. Can I go this 200 miles to the ocean on this river system? And I did it. And none of that. Well, no, there are a couple pieces in here about that. Pieces, shorter pieces I published about that paddling trip. But when I finally realized that I did not have to get in a car and drive 40 miles to Whitewater in the mountains, and I could actually paddle in my county, it really was a big change for me.
And I think there's another a slow transformation throughout the book, is that the rivers do get softer.
They do.
Young Haley told you that you get more skillful, but also as you get older, that adrenaline rush is not.
Yeah, I don't need it as much anymore.
It's not the same. Doesn't have the same focus or push.
I'm convinced I could spend a month. My wife would not like this, but I could spend a month getting into paddling shape, and I could probably go out and paddle Class 4 Whitewater again. But I just don't have any desire to do that anymore. For one thing, I know that there's more of a possibility that I would make a mistake at my age, at my late 60s, than had I been in my 40s. And mistakes, are costly on a river. And so toward the end of the book, they're more flat water. There's more flat water paddling. And if Donald Hall's right, maybe it's some good writing.
The ball gets smaller,
Yeah,
but there's more. You bring in the history, you take a nice trip with Betsy, your wife, Betsy Teeter, who's kind of like John, a legend up in the upstate. She helped found with John Hub City Writers Project, and is on the board of the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and has she's just kind of a cultural icon up there with John. But John and Betsy went out with John, one of Betsy's sons, John's stepson, out on a nice paddle down the Packlet. But you include all the history of the mills,
textile mills,
which
that river runs through Spartanburg County, the Packlet River, and that was a National Geographic Books piece as well. And they were kind of shocked. They called me. This was before the Yakagani's book, and they called me and asked me to be in an anthology. And they said, we will send you anywhere in the United States that you love to write about. Any wild place in the whole United States you can write about. You just need to love it. It needs to be someplace you love. And so I said, give me a couple days to think about it. And I started thinking, well, I love the Olympic Peninsula. I could go there and hike in the Olympic Mountains, or I love the Everglades. I could go back down there. I love Vermont. I love the Long Trail in Vermont. I could go up there. And then I started thinking, I have never paddled the river in Spartanburg County where my ancestors worked in cotton mills. And so I wrote them back. I called them back and I said, I've decided what I'm going to write about. I'm going to write about the Packlet River in Spartanburg, South Carolina, silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? Yes, I know. That's what I want to do. I want to write about that river. So I did, and when they sent out all the brochures to pitch this book, they had this line to the front that said, "From the Tetons to the Packlet." And I thought that was hilarious that they worked it in, and it ended up being a good piece. But it was a piece with deep history, because those rivers are working class rivers up there in the upstate. They churned those textile mills, powered those textile mills from the 1880s until grid power came in. Mm-hmm. And they were flooded, and big floods killed lots of people, and it was a great afternoon just paddling down that river with my wife and stepson, particularly my stepson, who was a nice diversion, because he was a little bored. He's a whitewater kayaker, and he was a little bored by this flat water river. Yeah. So I got to play with that.
Yeah. So it changes the subject. The river's still there, but it's more depth. You kind of go into the depth of history rather than the rushing surface in that case. Yeah. We get the rushing surface earlier when you almost drown in a hole,
right?
And pop up, and we do see a couple of drownings. You have poetry in here. You talk about the drowning of a friend, and you're working at the outdoor center in North Carolina, and there's a drowning victim.
That's a tough essay. It's an essay called "Death by Water," and it's about me spending a week on a river up in North Carolina looking for a body, with probing with poles in every eddy, and it took a week for this body to finally appear downstream in one of the eddies, and I write about that. That was a really tough essay.
I mean, rivers are dangerous too, and so that's part of their wildness, and they can't be easily controlled.
No.
So
even we're beginning to see that now, even out west with the drought problems on the Colorado. I mean, with all of our engineering and the billions probably that have been put into that dam system, we can't control the 10,000-year drought, 2,000-year drought, 2,000-year drought that's hit that area, and those big plugs are worthless now because there's not enough water coming down the river to fill those reservoirs. And who knows when it's going to shift? I mean, it could be another 1,000 years before it shifts.
You have a poem. There are poems in this book. Teaching the river. You end that poem with the comment, "In rivers, responsibilities begin." What did you mean by that? In rivers, responsibilities begin.
Well, I think that what I meant by it was that it's another one, like we said at the beginning of this, it's one of those landscapes where you can come into contact with true responsibility, not manufactured by human culture responsibility. If we wanted to go into some sort of deep reflection about the problem in the West, we could go back to John Wesley Powell in 1867 when he went down the Colorado, the first person to go down the Colorado, and John Wesley Powell writing and saying, "We should not settle the West except according to how much water there is now. We should not settle the West. I mean, we should not settle it. It shouldn't. I mean, and he said that, and nobody listened to him. Nobody listened to him. And that river showed him responsibility, I would say, when he went down and he saw it. And we as human beings decided we can control this thing. We can engineer a system out west to give enough water to Los Angeles and Phoenix and Las Vegas. We can do this. We're human beings. We're smart human beings. What do they say? If you got enough time and enough money and enough intellectual capacity, you can do anything. And we're proving that's not true, over and over, that there's some other element that we need to see that's not time, money, intellectual capacity. And I don't know what it is exactly, but rivers show us that over and over and over.
Yeah,
I think.
That beyond the human, there's something outside our will. Nature kind of has a will of its own. The ecosystem has.
It's bigger than. We tend to
material.
think, because we're so smart as a species, we tend to believe that we understand it. And it keeps telling us over and over, like last weekend, that we don't understand it completely. We don't control it. We don't come close to controlling it, much less understand it and control it. And we really do want to believe we can understand it, and we really do want to. E.O. Wilson, the great biologist who died last year, has a great image that I've used in a couple essays. He's in the Amazon rainforest, and it's night, and there's no light pollution, and he looks up at the night sky. And this is one of the smartest people to ever live, about systems and ecology and environment. And he said, and science, the great human industry of control and understanding. He looks up at the night sky and he looks at the stars. And there are a lot of stars in the Amazon in the night sky, but there's still a lot of blank space between them. And he says, those dots of light are what we've figured out about the simplest species, like an ant. And all that darkness between is what we don't know and may never know about why that creature and how that creature works in the world. And if you apply that to everything, to rivers, to love, everything, then you got an idea of how. But I don't know the answer to how we live with that. I mean, we're trying to figure it out, but I don't know how we live with it.
That sense of sort of awe-inspiring mystery.
Mystery. You keep coming back to the word mystery.
Mystery is really, and so that's what rivers. There's always something out of our reach, but you're kind of mad, to quote Walt Whitman, mad to be in contact with it. It drives you. That wildness. You want to be in contact with it. Would you read the poem? How about Thinking Like a River?
All right, let me read that one.
You want us to think like a river, and that's what we'll kind of read this short poem and think about what it means to think like a river.
Yes, and the reason that I wrote a poem called Thinking Like a River is because we at Wofford College, where I taught in the environmental studies program, we got a huge grant, a couple $100,000, to put our students and the environmental studies in contact with rivers for an entire 5-year period. We had every student who went through Wofford during that period took river trips, and people came in to talk about rivers, and we did research and all this stuff, and we called the program the Thinking Like a River Initiative. And so that's sort of where the Thinking Like a River is watery intimacy, is a side bay full of invasive memes, and a burbling current slipping under the mind's railway bridge. Out there, it's big water. If you don't reach it today, don't worry. You will return, even if your mind sinks. Sort of that whole idea we've been returning to, that it's bigger than us. It's all bigger than us out there.
Out there, it's big water.
It is big water.
So that thinking like a river, what would you, how can we think like a river?
First of all, we got to give ourselves to it and into the flow. Give ourselves to the flow and realize it's going somewhere. We just don't know where. That's the big water I'm talking about. I'm thinking like a river system, which, starts high and flows down and ends up here. Even though there were 9 dams I had to carry my boat around between here and Spartanburg, the water got there, it got down here anyway. 9 times it was stopped by dams, but I just came around them. And so it's flow mostly. Thinking like a river is knowing, knowing that you've got to go with it. And it will make it. The water will make it. You will make it, if you stay upright and head downstream.
Yeah, that's kind of life. You have some control. That your
there's
will.
Some control.
You
and
have
thank God
your
we got
skill.
science.
Yeah.
And
knowledge.
Engineering. I'm glad that we've got those things. I'm glad that we've got those things, and that we keep listening to those human systems. But there's also this bigger flow. Gary Snyder, that poet I mentioned, he called it the big flow. He talked about being in line with the big flow. And I've always liked that.
Yeah.
Be in line with the big flow.
So the big flow, and get a watery intimacy that you get. It's kind of a deep personal connection, that watery intimacy.
Yeah.
So that's your personal part, but it is big water. It's something bigger than us. And you will return even if your mind sinks. What about that final line, that great image?
Oh, God. Well, I guess there's something almost almost religious about that, the idea of life, of everlasting life, that whatever it is for every individual, your mind is going to sink,
You have the great final takeout.
Yeah, the big takeout. It's there
takeout.
for us all.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess that's part of it.
But you become part of the larger system.
Yeah.
You go with the larger flow there.
However you believe in it.
And there's something, as you said, there's you hear in that opening section, I hear the roar of wildness and make out pure vows of something other than me. Mm-hmm. There's something bigger, something more than us.
I keep hammering. I didn't realize till talking to you today how much I sort of hammer on certain ideas, that there's things that come up over and over and over again that I just can't seem to settle. I keep coming back to them, and one of them is that idea that there's something much bigger than me. And that's all religions suggest that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think these are kind of unsettled questions, that you keep probing and keep going after that sense of wildness out there that drives you, and that's why you 20 books and counting. You keep going with it.
I must not be finished with it.
Yeah, that's kind of good news that,
Yeah.
and it's not something to be finished with, because you keep getting new angles on
and
it.
people have been at it for
since
we've
since people have been people.
we have
Since we've been thinking about it.
Yeah. There's one more poem I want to read.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of time
Oh,
left?
sure. Yeah.
I don't know where we are in this conversation.
Yeah.
There's one poem I really wanted to read that I've really enjoyed reading when I've been in these. It's from the Mad Kayaker poems, and it's called "The Mad Kayaker Surveys His Gear," and it kind of fits in with that other poem, that essay I read. But it has my wife in it, and it has a really interesting sort of view of her. Okay, here it is. Mad Kayaker surveys his gear. And you got to imagine this kind of older guy like me, who's been a serious kayaker all his life, but his gear's now in the basement. Okay. He descends to the basement and flips on the bare bulb at the foot of the steps and enters the kingdom of floating. The cinder block walls and the raftered ceiling are a testament to his worship of things that keep him safe in falling water. 4 kayaks stacked like missiles in a wooden rack. a red tandem canoe suspended from above, helmets like severed heads on corner posts, life jackets hung to dry like body armor, paddles standing like Trojan spears in the corners. It's his armory against the everyday he has assembled in his basement. Armory against the everyday. We need to talk about that. And even on those days when the river flows without him, he stands here and surveys it all. Upstairs, his wife, reading in her chair, wonders, what does he do down there below her in the dark and the mold? She's seen the grounded kayaks like torpedoes waiting in their bends. With him, she's taken the canoe like a Viking galley and swamped it in the drink and then beached it high and dry on some sandbar for lunch. She knows that in the dark night her husband slips off in his pajamas and looks over his gear, but does not suspect that on nights like this, he descends the stairs and rummages through the gear and finds his favorite moldy spray skirt and spray top and pulls them on, then locates the oldest helmet, the one he's worn like a warrior on distant noisy rivers, and then snaps on the crackling vinyl strap. Then he positions his nose clip and tugs on the black rubber booties and drags his kayak down and sits in it. He stretches forward to flex before he leans into the invisible current and rocks the boat from side to side. The concrete floor gives way to stones and waves. If there is a river here, it is only in his head, where the roaring never ceases, where he always sits at the top of another stair step of rapids, the water soundless in the silent house.
Yeah.
Now, I did not go back to that first essay and go, I'm going to repeat this imagery from it, just like 35 years
back.
later, boom, there it was.
Like an epic warrior, you know, putting on the armor, the armory. What was the line? The armory against the every day.
The armory against the. That's another theme I think that I fight with a lot in my work is everydayness. You know, that's a theme, a literary theme that goes back a long way too. Walker Percy, I think about. He's one of my favorite fiction writers, and
wonderful.
The whole idea of how do you get out of the everydayness? How do you step out of it? You can't step out of it forever, but you can. It feels good when you do step out of it. And how do you do that? And I think kayaking was one of those ways that I did.
Yeah. And even, I mean, is this a happy ending, this poem, or is it's more grim?
Yeah, read it to me, the line.
All right, the end, and so he's sitting in this the kayak, all
tipping back and
geared
forth.
up.
Y'all get that right? I'm imagining that I'm paddling a real river, and I'm in the basement in the mold, and I got all my moldy gear on, and I'm.
So it's been a while, and rocks the boat from side to side. The concrete floor gives way to stones and waves.
I imagine them.
So, you know, that I'm thinking maybe positive. If there is a river here, it is only in his head where the roaring never ceases, where he always sits at the top of another stair step of rapids, the water soundless in the silent house.
Well, you know, it's a great tension between the imagination and reality. You know that, you know, the roaring never ceases. I mean, there's something exciting and good about being on a river and the river's roaring and you're at the top of the rapid and you're looking down. So that's not a negative, but it is kind of a and then suddenly it doesn't exist at the end. I mean, the silent river ceases. Is that what it says?
The water soundless in the silent house.
The water soundless, and that'd be a great title for a book, wouldn't it? The water soundless in the silent house.
That there's a need to get it. The imagination is strong, but there's, it's limited. You
It's
need
limited.
to get out there
in the real thing.
in the world. Yeah,
in the real thing.
To feel that world that you talked about. That you got to get out
Yeah.
there and be in contact.
And
with
it's
it.
interesting after these poems. Here's another psychological thing for you that I've never explored, and I don't know if there are any connections in the poems, but I wrote many of these mad kayaker poems during the 3 months my mother was dying, and it was really working on my insides, and I guess there was something about me growing older and her dying, and that made that created a lot of these poems, these mad kayaker, that made me mad.
Yeah.
The mad kayaker was mad, going mad because he was growing older and his mother was dying, and
it's it kind of reminded me of Tennyson's Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses, about kind of the aging warrior not able to go into battle anymore, or kind of, but not as hopeless. I think there is some hope at the end, but there is the roaring never ceases in the head.
I love that, the idea of the basement and the upstairs, and my wife is up there and she's comfortable and she's thinking about these things, but she's got her chair. She knows where she should be at this time in her life, in the chair reading, and she's comfortable with it. And yet I'm going down in the basement, trying on my past.
You need something that river gives you that place to focus your attention, where the roaring of the head gives way to the great flow of the river. The river's roaring for the time being. So you need that contact with nature.
Yeah. I think that, a friend of mine, though, pointed out to me one time that all these stories I've written about doing all this crazy stuff that I've done are not the things. They're stories about the things. That you never can just write the real thing.
Yeah.
Nobody can. Yeah.
So there's and you've done a lot of writing, and there are a lot of adventures in here, a lot of wildlife that you see. So we get to kind of take part in that, and writing is one way to maybe quiet the roaring in the head for the time being.
Some people do it with drugs. Some people do it with writing.
There are other options. Some with both. At the same time. Don't recommend it, but it is something different than the experience itself. Getting out in nature, kayaking and rivers. One of your things, but you do have others. But it seems to be that direct contact experience with the ecology, with something more than human, is
but I've never
crucial.
Reached a point where I can just do it, like the Nike commercial. I'm always thinking about how can I interpret it through writing, either poetry or prose. I can say for certain that I've never been out in the world where I'm just there. Where I've always got a journal. I'm always thinking, how will I write about this when I get back? I've often thought about, what would it feel like to not have to interpret it in some way through words? What would that feel like? Would something open up to me that has never opened up before? If there wasn't that intermediary step waiting for me, I can't get back. When I was writing this book on Phil, or Phil's book, this one. So what I would do is I would come down here, and I would go out with Phil, and we'd do these amazing things, and I would take notes, and then I would drive back to Spartanburg, and I would rush to my study, and I would write a draft of what we did as quickly as I could, remembering all I could remember, and then I would take my notes and I would match them up. And then I would call Phil, and I would say, clarify this for me. And then I would send the draft to Phil, and it had Phil's quotes in it. So it was this constant process of interpreting what happened. When nobody will ever know what actually happened. This is my perception of it. This is my record of it. But I've often wondered, what would it be like to not be a writer? I'll never know.
Yeah.
I'll never know.
That's kind of the writer's curse or the artist's curse, I
Well,
guess.
if you're a musician, you're probably doing the same thing with sound.
Or a painter or
Painter,
a
yes.
photographer.
Yeah, let's go open the question.
Open up.
Just to your point about, is that sad, or I saw it as that the river's within you. You're down in your basement.
Yeah.
You're reliving that. You're creating that.
Going
Even though
back to
you
it.
can't get out there. It's within you. I thought that was positive.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but there is that river. The mad kayaker has the river within him forever. Yeah, it's part of me. Yeah, good. That's a good interpretation. I like that one. Much better than the roaring in the head being negative. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
What else are you thinking about after all this crazy river talk? Any other questions or comments? How many paddlers are there out there that occasionally paddle a boat on some water? A few, yeah. Do y'all interpret, or are you just there?
I think we've been here about 2 years.
Yeah.
From Massachusetts.
Yeah.
We have sea kayaks.
Yeah.
And we're used to the bays and inlets. So we're adjusting to paddling down here because it's different.
It's different. Yeah, we do it a lot in like Narragansett Bay.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
more, it's a little different.
You're not going to go out in the ocean because you're right in the Atlantic and it's a little dangerous out there. So our thoughts are different now.
Yeah.
Down
Have you tried to? Do you try to articulate that through writing or photography or anything? Does anything happen after you get out of the boat and go back?
we take a nap.
That's what I should try.
Yeah.
I should say, I'm not going to write about this at all. I'm going to take a nap.
You could, Shakespeare, bury your books. You're done with it. That's
That's good.
Easier said than done.
One thing that you mentioned back there that I always use an outboard motor. I do have the canoe.
I know.
I've used it for 30 years.
Yeah.
But the reason I used an outboard motor, I was working,
Yeah.
and I had to do the whole coast twice a month.
Yeah.
You don't do that in a kayak.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You got to get it done.
Do the job and turn in the report. Whether or not.
See, my report doesn't have anybody out there waiting for it. That's that's the difference. Except, if we run under contract for a book like this one. We have by the way, I think it's great. There's a great chapter in here where Phil takes me on a motorboat tour through the Santee Delta. We go in a motorboat to all the different points, and it's just fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things I said for certain. I said, Phil, you got to take me out in the boat. And we did it, yeah. So that's probably one of only 2 motorized reflections I have in my oeuvre.
Yeah.
There's that one, and then I had a book called Web of Water about the Saluda River and the Reedy River. There was another coffee table book like this one. And in that one, I go in Lake Greenwood in a motorboat with a photographer to a beach, an inland beach. At that time, I wanted to write a book called Inland Beaches of South Carolina because it was a place where all the locals, it was a sandbar out in the middle of the lake, and everybody noses their motorboats up on this sandbar and gets drunk every Saturday and Sunday. So they would go out there, and there'll be 75 motorboats with their noses up on the sandbar and everybody partying. And so I wrote a piece about that.
There's some places down here you could repeat that.
First time I ever was able to use the term strawberry Rita. in an essay.
Nice. Yeah.
I didn't even know what a strawberry Rita was until that essay.
Very nice. Yeah. Well, that's a different kind of wildlife you're
Yeah.
encountering out on inland beaches of
Don't
South
you think
Carolina.
a book called Inland Beaches
Yeah.
of South Carolina would have a big
That would sell.
big selling point?
For sure. Yeah.
Because almost every lake or some rivers have big sandbars on them where people show up, and maybe the only beaches we have in 50 years.
We have Santee, yeah, true. Santee Island here, that's kind of the scene on weekends.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, on the
I'd have
one
to
side of
have
it.
to put that one in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, out in the Waccamaw River here.
Sandy Island.
Sandy Island.
There's a coastal beaches just like those you just described, where everybody goes on the weekend. It's called North Italy.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
What else? Any other river stories?
As a whitewater, have you ever heard of a Nantucket sleigh ride?
No.
I'm curious, I mean, as a whitewater kayak, you were up in the Hudson River, up in the Adirondacks.
Yeah.
Kayaking, and I think there's a way where you can maneuver your boat, maneuver the, actually it's a raft,
Mhm.
the raft, so you're actually up almost on a sleigh ride, and the water is rushing by.
Yeah, and you're surfing, surfing a standing wave. It's called a Nantucket sleigh ride. Really great. Yeah, that's really great. One of my favorite pieces in this book is a piece I wrote with about another mentor of mine, a writer named Franklin Burroughs, who's from this area actually. He grew up in Conway,
right.
and then he went to Harvard and ended up teaching at Bowdoin and spent his life up there as an exiled Southerner. And he, when I went to Maine once, he was retired, and he's a lover of wood and canvas canoes. The old-timey canoes before aluminum and PVC took over the market. And you've got to really be a great paddler to paddle a wooden canvas canoe on a whitewater river, because one pop of a rock and you've broken 3 ribs in the boat, wooden ribs in the boat, and punctured it or whatever. And so he said, okay, we're going to go, the two of us are going to go and paddle the Dead River, which is a really strong class 3-4 whitewater river. It's continuous whitewater for about 13 miles. Like, there are no breaks in the rapids. You're always in the rapids. We're going to go and we're going to paddle the Dead River in a wooden canvas canoe. And I've been in some really hard whitewater, and this was the scariest thing I've ever done, because I mean, it wasn't scary we were going to die, but had we made one wrong move, we'd have splintered that boat and ended up like walking out 7 miles, because there's no road along the river. So I've got a piece in here called Gradient,
Yeah.
about paddling the Dead River with him. We made it. We cracked 1 rib, and he was not happy about that because it was my fault. I missed a draw, and we popped up against a rock and cracked a rib in the boat, and it didn't hurt it enough so that we had a problem getting down. But he said it was not a perfect run because we cracked that rib in the boat.
Yeah.
So maybe we
Great.
took a Nantucket sleigh ride or 2 on that trip. I didn't even know it.
Yeah. 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 One of, I mean, there are quite a few of dangerous excursions that you have in this.
Oh God.
Yeah, you've had your share.
I've had my share. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions for John about this great one, still upright and headed downstream? He gets in the flow of his writing here throughout all these river writings. Couple of lakes in there, but mostly rivers here flowing.
Yeah. I'll stand over there for a few minutes and look over the books over there. I got a few if you're interested in them.
And yeah, you can come talk to John afterwards. Buy a book or 2 or 3. He's got plenty. And this is a partial selection of his canon, his whole his whole arsenal, his armory of books. Let's call
Armory
it.
of books. I've been
And-
armoring myself against
An armory
everydayness.
against the everyday. We'll add that to our vocabulary, but truly is. I didn't, I had this full 3-paragraph introduction of John, but I kind of skirted that at the beginning. But he is, he's a member of the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and has, he's been, as you heard, in National Geographic. He's been in Outside magazine. He's, all the big outdoorsy river magazines. He's a big deal nationally, but we're very proud to kind of call him our own here in South
Thank you.
Carolina. And he's done a whole lot for the ecology here as a writer and naturalist in the state. So he's a real treasure and a friend of the library.
And I'm going to mention again, I'm not sure if it's sold out, but if you're interested in this book,
Yeah.
We are going to be at someplace tomorrow. Where are we, Phil?
It's
Somewhere up in Merle's Inlet. It's called the Movable Feast.
movable Inlet Affairs.
Yeah,
Inlet
and
Affairs.
You get for it's lunch. Phil's got his photos he's going to show, so that'll be super exciting. And like I said, we'd love to see you there.
11 a.m. tomorrow.
yeah.
Inlet Affairs, a different book and a great one right about this area. Linda Ketron, a great friend of the library too. She's running that, so that's at Inlet Affairs, 11 a.m. tomorrow. Get a nice meal and great talk with John and Phil, and a great book. So, and the book comes, I think, with the meal. I think is that.
I think so. I'm not sure how they deal with that.
So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much again. Let's give John a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Down here. And thank y'all, and thank our friends of the Waccamaw Library. Grab cookies, cake,
Yes.
tea before you go.
Cookie and cake time.
Very good. All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much
y'all.
for coming out.